There has to be a life after death because our salvation is completely based on that possibility.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we were to live and die, and that is the end of the story, the entire basis of our Christian faith is invalidated, in my opinion. The dead rising from the grave, people vanishing in the fields, ascending towards heaven, and the rest that are left behind are condemned to an endless inferno with the devil. I feel it's not quite as dramatic, but there is a life after death, and I feel like the Lord reveals it to us in our own different.
Check this out.
Okay.
I look good.
Okay. On the street, and I got my swag on. Okay.
Welcome, everyone. This is another episode of Kanayo's Corner. I've got two gentlemen on the show with me tonight, and these were the gentlemen on the first episode. So I've got Oga from Maryland in the US, and I've got Maikano somewhere in Nigeria. And Maikano, where are you calling from in Nigeria?
Right now, Kaduna.
Okay, you're all over the place, aren't you? So we've got a lot to talk about tonight, and we're going to talk about. So I always say that life is like a game of football, and we all play to win. So we are going to be talking about life on this show, not just life, but the afterlife. Ooh. So I mean, what do we think happens when we die, when we are no longer here? But first of all, before we crack on, I'll just ask: do you guys believe in life after death?
I do.
Okay. So there's more to what we are experiencing here on Earth, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. And Oga?
Yep, I do. I believe there is a life after death.
Okay. So that's a good start. On the first episode, you both talked about some very interesting ideas, and I felt we should explore some more. And Mekano, you talked about your experience, your near-death experience. For those who didn't watch the first episode, do you want to recount that experience?
Yeah. I think that there really isn't. I think I pretty much said it in the first episode, right? So basically, what happened was, I went out with a few friends, came back, might have had a little too much to drink on that day. I think I can't really remember the events. So I got home, and then had a shower and went to bed. And then I felt like I was asleep. Well, it felt like I was asleep, and then suddenly felt like I was having a dream. But it turns out that I wasn't having a dream because I was just hovering over my body. Like I just saw, like there were two Mexicanos literally. I could see my body on the bed, and then I could just see myself hovering around. And I tried to get back into my body, if you like, and I couldn't. And I was hearing, and for some strange reason, I could hear everything happening around the house. Like I suddenly just had an idea of what was happening in every other room. Like, so I was in a 3-bed and there were people in the other rooms, but I could suddenly see what was happening. And after what felt like an eternity, really, it felt like I struggled for a very long time, and then it just felt like I'd fallen into a trance. And then I woke up and I was lying down. But what I know that it felt so real. It definitely was not a dream, you know. And then the reason why I know it wasn't a dream is because, the next day, I reached out so I spoke with my friend. I had a friend in one of the rooms, right? And my cousin was in the other room, and I told them exactly what they were wearing. I mean, what they wore to go to bed, like the parts that they had, or everything. Like I was like, what were you doing at so time? So and so thing was happening in the room. Like I had a clear picture of what was happening and how certain things were in the room. And these were not rooms that I'd, gone into in a while. So
Yeah.
it felt real, to be honest.
And was this the first time this sort of thing happened to you? And
Yeah,
the only
first
time?
time. Sorry? No, no, no,
Okay,
no,
so was
no.
it the
I mean,
first time? Yes. And is it the only time?
I've had some very bizarre things happen to me, but this is the first time that I had this like near death experience. Like feeling, I mean, the other is probably anesthesia, right? So I've gone under the knife a couple of
Okay.
times, and obviously, what happens then, you're just, you can't really attribute a lot to that. But for a proper NDE, this is probably, the one and only time, you know. I
Wow.
do believe that I've
Wow.
seen ghosts though, but that's another conversation for another day.
Okay. Sounds interesting.
Well,
So what did yeah. Okay, Oga, do you want to add anything to that?
no, I wanted to add a follow up to Meccano's ghost sighting. So when you do see a ghost, what is the mental checklist you go through to make sure you're not actually hallucinating? Given that we all have medical training, I would know that hallucinations are very possible. What is your mental checklist for
Yeah, that's
verifying that you're not
that's a tricky one
legitimately
because
going psycho?
but Iman,
Okay,
that's a very
what
tricky
if
one, right? Because even if there's a mental checklist, are you going to like what? You do like a self-evaluation. I'm not even sure that you're in a position to, conduct a self-evaluation, but do you believe in ghosts though?
Um, I I think that enough people have reported seeing ghosts that
okay, wait, hold
it
up,
has
hold up,
to be
hold up.
true.
We
I
hold
have
up.
not seen ghosts, but I believe it has to be possible. Yes.
We
Guys,
hold up. So let's zoom out a little bit, right? Let's zoom out. What exactly is the ghost? This,
no.
the spirit of a dead person. Or, I mean, what exactly is a
Yeah,
ghost?
the spirit of a dead person is a ghost that appears in a physical form, right? Because I mean,
So
spirits
what is
are
the spirit?
what?
Or what is a spirit then? What is a spirit? Okay,
How does one answer what is a spirit?
this conversation could easily veer off, right? But let's keep it to life after death, right? And you both have said you believe in life after death. So, I mean,
Trying to
yes, I
tie
know
up
that
my
you both
ghost
are
story.
Christians.
I was trying to tie up my ghost story to life after death, but don't worry, we can always revisit it. Please go on.
Okay, you guys are both Christians, right? So, so I'm going to have to ask, what do you think happens after we die? Okay, okay, you go ahead.
So I have no idea.
But you're a
But
Christian.
hold on. So here's where I go back to. So the Bible flips between allegory, revelation, true telling of history that at some point I struggle to tease out what is literal in the Bible versus a higher order revelation. But I do know that there has to be a life after death. And the reason why I'm being overly philosophical about it is that there's a lot of things in the Bible that I don't believe were meant to be taken literally. And there's a lot of things in the Bible that I think were meant to be taken literally. I think that there has to be a life after death because our salvation is completely based on that possibility.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we were to live and die, and that is the end of the story, the entire basis of our Christian faith is invalidated, in my opinion. So I do think that there is a life after death. I know that there will be a reckoning for our actions on earth. Whether it's the way that it is framed in popular imagination, the dead rising from the grave, people vanishing in the fields, ascending towards heaven, and the rest that are left behind are condemned to an endless inferno with the devil. I feel it's not quite as dramatic, but there is a life after death. And I feel like the Lord reveals it to us in our own different ways. I do not think the Bible is literal in the description of what the life after death would be, but I do know it exists.
Right. And Maikano, how would you relate faith and logic? So given like what we're talking about, life after death.
I think most times there's a conflict, right, between faith and logic because, logic tells you to look before you leap. Faith tells you jump, I've got you covered. So I think there's always that conflict between faith and logic, but it all depends on how you really apply it. And like you said, we're Christians. I'm a man of faith, and I wasn't always a person of faith, to be honest. I think it's something like we had this conversation on the first episode, talking about how
Yeah.
we evolved, right? And for me, it was maybe the last 5, 6 years that I've seen certain things that have happened in my life after I've taken time
I
out to
think you're
pray and
breaking up.
apply my faith.
Okay, can you hear him?
Not anymore.
Maikano,
But I can take a
Sorry,
stab.
guys.
Okay,
I think we've lost him. He's frozen on my screen.
same.
All right. Maikano, if you can hear us, just hold that thought. We'll come back to you. Let me just go to Oga for now. So, Oga, I mean, you've pretty much touched on it, though, but how do you relate faith and logic?
It's another one that I've wrestled with a lot.
Yeah.
Because I tend to be a very rational, logical person. I act on what I see, what I hear, what I can touch, feel. And so, having
Sorry,
been
guys.
raised in a very Christian home, having been raised in a very Christian home from birth right through adulthood, I was steeped very deeply in the Word of God. And I feel like some of the encounters I've had with God was God saying, well, since you think you're too logical and too rational to believe, here is a real experience that you cannot explain any other way. And why do I say that? If you apply logic too much to the Word of God and to our Christianity, you get yourself confused. And that is always the intention of the devil in our lives. And so there is part reading, there's part revelation, and there's part dwelling with the Holy Spirit. Having the Holy Spirit in you reveals a lot of things that you cannot logically explain, that even the Bible has not sort of logically outlined in a literal sense.
True.
And so it requires understanding that there is a limit to your understanding, if that makes sense. To rationalize your faith, you have to understand that there are things you do not understand. And when you hear the popular atheists and agnostics on air talking about how they don't believe in a higher power and an all-seeing, all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient God, their fallback is because they cannot understand how there is one. But that is by definition how it should be. If we understand the things of God, then we are ourselves gods, right?
Yeah.
And
And I think for
so
the
it
agnostic,
is,
And I think for the
yeah,
agnostic, that's what the problem is. There's a constant attempt to rationalize, try to understand, to unpack. And so when you can't really explain certain situations, especially things that you probably would attribute to divine intervention, then it just doesn't make sense. And because it doesn't make sense, um, then you decide not to believe in the whole concept of God altogether. But like I said,
Yeah.
I was saying something about
Okay.
the conflict between logic
Yeah, go on.
and faith, and I, uh, very similar to you. I was raised in a Christian family, but like I said, I never really took my faith seriously. Didn't really bother too much about it. And certain things happened to me when I was a child, maybe when I was about 10 or 11, and I had a few other encounters when I was 16, and then some other encounters shortly before we got into UJ. And then none of these things really made sense, right? But about like 6, 7 years ago, imagine meeting someone totally random that you've never met, and you guys get into a conversation, and he tells you something that happened to you when you were 10 years old, right? And he's talking about certain things that happened to you, conversations that you had as a 10-year-old, right? So basically, this is what happened when I was 10. It was a Sunday. We had just closed from church. Very long ECWA service. Oga can relate. And I was going home, but I was supposed to meet up with I think my brother or some friends. I can't remember now. And it was at that time in the early 90s when kids were not allowed to talk to strangers. There was this whole
Yeah.
idea of, if they give you something, if you're given a candy and you take candy, you probably get initiated in some secret society, or you pick money on the ground and you turn into a yam. You remember those things that happened when we were
Tip
kids,
of
right?
yeah.
Those
No.
stories. Anyway, it was about
Those
in the
used to
90s.
freak me out.
So we one of those times when you're not supposed to speak to strangers. So we're leaving church and I'm walking towards my friend's house, I think, or
I
something.
think we're having connection issues again.
And yeah, my network is bad, guys.
No, okay, but it looks like
Can
it's
you hear
better
me?
now. So do you want to go ahead?
Is it? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, now
You're
we
back.
can hear you now.
Right. Sorry. Nigeria is what it is, guys. So you guys would have to pick it up and live with it. I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I can
so
see that you are.
yeah. So I'm walking down the street and I see two guys, right, wearing a suit. Hot Sunday afternoon in Kano, and they're wearing black suits, right? And one of them walks up to me, and I'm holding an NIV Bible, the kind of NIV Bible that Gideon used to give back in the days. The black NIV with gold print and all of that. So one
The
of them
one that
calls
used to
me.
be in hotel rooms.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
one of them sort of motions to me to come over, and for some reason I'm not scared. So I cross the street and I walk over to where they're standing, and one of them says, "What are you holding in your hand?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a Bible." And he was like, "Can I see it?" So I hand him the Bible. The other guy doesn't speak to me at all. So he opens the Bible, and my name is written on it, and he goes like, "You're going to do exploits for God, Adamu Maikano. When the time is ready, you will remember." And I forget about it completely, right? Because it actually happened. And so I meet this guy randomly. I just walk into some place. I mean, I was hanging out with a few friends, and so I was supposed to drop by my aunt's house. This is like 7, 8 years ago now. So I go to my aunt's house and she's having a prayer session with her pastor. So there's like a small waiting area, and I decided to just sit there and wait for them to round up the prayer session. And so midway through the prayer session, the pastor says, okay, so from where the pastor stood, he could see me standing or sitting on a sofa just a few meters away from the main living room, right? And so he motions to me and said, join us in prayer. And I'm like, nah, I'll just sit here. He's like, no, but what if God has a message for you? And so reluctantly I joined the prayer, and he rounds up the prayer. And then when he's rounding up the prayer, he tells me that he looks at me out of nowhere and goes like, "There's something that happened to you when you were 10 years old. Now is the time. Today is the appointed day for you to remember," or something like that. He was like, "What
Wow.
can?" He was like, "What can you remember from when you were 10 to 12 years old?" And I'm like, "Nothing really." He was like, "You met some people. Can you remember?" And then like that, everything just comes back, and he says, "Can I remember?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, he doesn't want me to say it. He wants to tell me so that I would know that he was sent by God, right? And so he tells me
Wow.
everything that happened to me when I was 10. He says, one of them spoke to you, the other one didn't speak to you. That was your first encounter with angels. That was your first encounter with the angelic ministry, right? Angelic visitation or whatever that was. And needless to say, I didn't really believe him, right? I didn't believe him because you have to understand, I was coming from proper Equa, and so this was not something that I could wrap my head around. And so I didn't really take that seriously, And then fast forward maybe like a week or two later, I fall seriously sick, and I just keep on hearing voices telling me, "You are going to die. You are going to die." And I really felt like life was leaving my body because I was that sick. I couldn't stand. I couldn't do anything. I was going about my business, lying down. I mean,
Wow.
friends had to come and help me at home. And then for some reason, he's in the area and he decides to see a neighbor of mine. And that's like 3 houses away from where I live. and someone saw him, and I can't remember. I think I went out to puke or something, and I saw him, and he was doctor, you live around here? I was like, oh yeah, my house is just not far. He was, oh, I came to see someone in the area. I didn't even know that you stay around here. He was like, when I'm done with him, can I come into your house and pray with you? He didn't even know I was ill, and I was like, yes. So I sort of managed to get back into the house, and I lie down on a tree, sit there. And after like 30 minutes, he walks in, and the first thing he said when he walks into my house, he was like, I smell death in this room.
Wow.
The first thing he says, right? He says, I smell death. And he looked at me and he was like, but your time, it's not your appointed time. They're trying to kill you. Why did? And he's having conversations, and it looks like he's just blabbing because he's like, why are they trying to attack you? It's not your time, blah, blah, blah. And then he prays for me. He lays hands on me and he prays for me, and I feel well in an instant. Like,
No way.
Bible
Really?
instant recovery. That was essentially what I mean. I was still a bit weak, but the fever, the headache, the body ache, everything vanished like that. Like I was so
Wow.
well, I got out of bed and walked him to the main road for him to get a bike and go home. So I've had experiences like that. I've had enough experiences to know that, like Oga said, this all can be for nothing. You can't just experience all of this just here, right? And there's nothing after we leave this earth. So
Wow. I mean, so that's interesting. And if you think about it, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but every religion has, like their teaching based on life after death, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, so every religion.
I mean,
So,
some
but
sort
do
of
you guys think
idea
that?
of what happens
Yeah,
to us when we die,
yeah,
even if it's not life after
of
death in that sense.
Yeah, of course. But do you think that that the idea of life after death is sort of like a comfort-seeking idea that man has, to help them just get through this life? I mean, obviously I'm Christian, and so I believe in that, right? But just think but just zoom out a little bit, right? And you think that this is just an idea that man has surrounded himself with, that is comforting to know that at some point all your troubles on earth here, you get, maybe compensated for all of that in the afterlife. But what do you think about that, though? Does the question make any sense?
I mean, if that's for
Ima,
me,
you want to go?
sure.
Yeah, it might
I,
go. Yeah.
I think that a lot of religions started as a way to seek some peace from a turbulent life. But I don't feel that way about Christianity. I feel that it's real. It's the only real religion. And the reason why I feel that way is that God also shows himself to people who are not seeking him. I think that for me is one of the most interesting things for me. When Saul, who became Paul, was having an encounter on the road to Damascus, he wasn't looking for God. He wasn't seeking an encounter. That encounter found him because it was his time and it was his day. I don't know that happens in any other faith other than ours. I have had instances where I also had divine encounters when I wasn't looking for it, right? And I have always been a skeptic in the sense that I know that there is a lot of false prophets. I know there's a lot of fake pastors, people who are in it for monetary and material gain, people who are subverting the word of God for vain reasons.
Personal gain.
For personal gain. And so for me, despite all of that skepticism about human failure, it has still not shaken my understanding and belief in God and in the afterlife and in the power of the name of Jesus. And so I think it can only be a personal experience, because as much as, we talk about this, if you really haven't had an experience, you're really just part of a social club. It's a social engagement for you. It's a ritual, just like people have different rituals, veganism, join a whatever club, a dance club, do yoga. People have rituals that make life easier to get through. If you haven't had that personal divine experience, you really cannot understand what in
Yeah.
God's name we the rest of us are talking about, because it's like Greek to you. I've had multiple instances where, and this is the part of it that I really struggle with, why there are so many fake purveyors of the word. On so many of them. It's happened so many times. One
Yeah,
of
but I
them, the
think it's
guy meets me.
scriptural, Ima. I think we're just leaving the
Yeah, it
times
is
that the Bible
scriptural.
talks about,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah, when the
Absolutely.
Bible
You know,
talks about in
I
the
meet,
final, in the last days, there would be, lots of fake prophets and lots of
yeah,
people peddling,
Yeah.
falsehood. This is essentially, we're living those times now.
yeah, exactly. But also, and that's I think that really solidifies the point that if you are not personally centered with your own experience and your own direct contact and experience with God, you're really just following societal rules and you're part of a social club. And that's the part of it that you cannot pass on to someone else. You cannot explain. It has to be your experience
Yeah.
and yours alone. And until I had that, I was just socially conditioned to be a Christian until I had my own personal experience. A few times in my life. Once I was 17, thereabout. The other time I was 23, maybe. Without those experiences, I probably would have drifted into atheism now. That's the honest truth, because, your logic can only get you so far. You have to have a personal experience for it to be real for you.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the thing,
that's true. And you
and the
shared
thing with logic
okay.
is that as long as you're looking for things that make sense to debunk your position of faith, there are enough theories out there that have been supposedly proven that you can latch on to actually debunk whatever position
True.
you think you're standing
True.
on as far
True.
as your faith is concerned. Right. So like Ima
So
said,
Yeah,
sorry,
true. Now let me
to that
let
exact
me ask you
point you're
guys this,
making,
right?
Meccano, have you also found it? This is something I find every time I hear an alternate theory of the creation, the Big Bang. I hear all of these things, and I pause, and it requires a lot more faith to
absolutely.
believe in those theories than it is to believe in the
Yeah,
creation
true.
story, in the Genesis, in the
Yeah,
Ab-
Bible.
true.
I hold up
Absolutely.
those theories side by side. I'm like, this
Yeah,
Big
which is
Bang,
easier to
okay.
believe, right?
Yeah,
Which is easier to believe. Okay, but so let me switch gears now just a little bit, right? There's an idea that I've really struggled with, and I'd like to know what you guys think about this. Now, obviously, nature has a way of recycling things, right? So that very little goes to waste. That's just how the life is. So what do you guys think about reincarnation? Yeah, what do you think about reincarnation? Because if if you do like a deep dive into like reincarnation and you go on YouTube, you watch videos and then you will see that there are some pretty damning stories about this which sound very convincing. And because like nature has a way of recycling things, is it not possible that nature has a way of recycling dead people, souls just go round and round and round? What do you guys think about that, though? Because some cultures actually do believe in this.
No, but Casey, let's do a mathematical. Let's think about this simply in. This is not to say it does not. It's not a supernatural event. Possibly it is. But let's think about it simply statistically, right? So when two people conceive, man and woman, they pass
Yeah,
on 50%. The child
yeah,
get 50% of their genes from one side, 50% from the
yeah,
other. Then that
yeah,
child goes on, meets another person who is from another separate family. They procreate, they pass on 50% each to their child, and so on and so forth. Do you not think that just generally by the luck of the draw alone, at some point in the future, there will be enough aggregation of genetic similarity in your descendants for it to appear as though someone was reincarnated? I mean, think about it. You have a child, the child looks a lot like you, right?
yeah.
Because the child has 50% of, 50% of the child's DNA is kind of
Now,
yours.
no, no, no,
And then from
no.
your mother,
You are,
maybe
yeah,
And he
Yeah,
might have
true.
spoken,
So
okay,
you're talking about
he might have spoken like a true
you can
epidemiologist,
explain that.
right?
Let me just say this line, just one line, just one line. In terms of physical attributes, yes, 100%. But there are stories, right, where I've seen these stories on YouTube. I've seen them multiple times, where a little child is born and they can recount in detail, in great detail, their past life and sometimes how they were killed. For example, you could see one say things like they were stabbed or something, and they will have a scar, and then they will tell like their listeners where they died and all of that, and they will find. I mean, there are some incredible stories that are jaw
Yeah,
dropping. I'm not
I think
saying that I
I've
believe
seen
they're
a
100%,
couple
but they
as
are jaw
well.
dropping.
I've seen a few, right? I have to admit, I really haven't studied much on reincarnation. So my position is um the Bible's position. It's not something that the Bible speaks about in
Yeah,
that sense. And so for me, that is the guide for me here. And that does not mean that it doesn't happen. Like I said, right? The disclaimer is I haven't studied enough on the subject to
but let me throw you one question now on the Bible. Wait. So so I'll come back to you, right? In the Bible, right? When did Jesus not say that John the Baptist was, was akin to Elijah? I mean, now I don't remember the
yeah,
verse where that was, but there's something about that, right?
yeah. You know, they were talking about, oh, Elijah would come back again. And I think he responded by saying, Elijah came and executed him without even knowing that he had come. And he was, of course, drawing parallels between Elijah and John the Baptist. But what I'm trying to say is that
Bingo.
theologians would tell you that he wasn't talking about a reincarnation. He was talking about when prophets have like mantles and offices and certain, mandates that they have, very similar to the way Elijah was taken away and then, Elisha got the mantle
Okay,
to continue. So he was talking about John the Baptist in that sense, in an official sense. I think that's what theologians believe. They don't believe it's a reincarnation in that sense, but more like
got you.
John the
Got you.
Baptist was operating in the same office that Prophet Elijah operated in.
And that's very similar to how Joshua was operating in the office of Moses, isn't it?
Yeah, very similar. And then obviously a lot of the things that happen, if not all, in the Old Testament are sort of like pointers to Christ. There's so much from the consecration and parting of the Red Sea
Yeah.
and what happened in the wilderness with the serpents with people getting, bitten by snakes and uh, the rod that was raised and people looking up and getting saved. All of that is some sort of foreshadowing of
Yeah.
the salvation story that becomes a bit more explicit in the New Testament.
Yeah, true. And Olga, now let me ask you this, right? I mean, I know that you are, you're a very scientific guy, right? Now, what if you found out, right, that there was no such thing as life after death, right? And there was nothing after you die. How would that, how would that affect how you live your life now?
That's a really good question. I think I probably have the
Well,
same.
before you answer that, and how? Okay, please go on. I feel like just go on. Go on. No worries. I feel like some part of the question is being
I'm
illogical,
approaching the
though.
question.
Oh,
I'm
come on.
approaching the question not as a spiritual, religious one, but as a thought exercise, okay? A brain teaser. So I'm just going to answer this as though it were a brain teaser in a social gathering. I think I would approach it the same way that I have approached the philosophy of insignificance, right? So there is this thought, this school of thought that we worry too much about leaving a mark, about being indelible, about leaving something, a legacy, right? This legacy obsession, there's this exceeding drive to be. But then I thought about it and I said, after death, within a year, most people, except your most closest associates, have forgotten about you. After a few more years, your dearest loved ones still remember you as a fading, distant memory, but eventually you will be forgotten very quickly. In the same generation in which you died, you will be forgotten, right? Think about the greatest people that ever lived. I mean, we hear of great scientists, philosophers, and everything. We hear a little bit of the snippets of the great works that they did. As great, as earth shaking, as legacy rearranging as they were, even for them, we only remember tiny little snippets of the exceptional things that they did. Think about all the pharaohs of ancient Egypt that built all those huge pyramids to ensure that they are not forgotten. A lot of those pyramids are gone, but even the one that remains, neither you nor I nor Meccano remembers the name or the life or the height or the character, the personality of any one of those people, dead, forgotten, and gone. I take peace in that philosophy. I am completely at peace with being forgotten. I am at peace with the day that I leave the earth. I mean, like I say, I'm not treating this as a religious question. It's a brain teaser at a social level. I mean, yes, as a Christian, there is a life after death. But if you were to remove that from the equation, I'll be perfectly happy with being forgotten the day I die, and I would not change a thing, because even right now, I try to be the best person that I can be kind to all men, do as I'd like it done unto myself. So I wouldn't say it changes much, but there you go.
Meccano, same question to you.
Yeah. I mean, Ima has pretty much said it all, right? And for me, this is it. If there's nothing when we die, then I just fade into nothingness, right? But if there's something when we die, and I believe that there's nothing, I really don't want to have to use the whole of eternity to find that out, right? So
You don't want to FO.
eternity is too long a time to try and figure that out, right? So you don't want to figure it out when you've crossed to the other side. So look at it this way. It's a win-win for me, all right? I believe Christianity is the way. I believe that the only way we live through eternity with God is if you believe in Jesus Christ. I know there's lots of people that believe there are multiple ways to get to God. I believe what the Bible teaches, that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one gets to the Father except through him. So, but just imagine, let's assume all of that doesn't exist. It doesn't really matter. I hold on to my faith anyways, and then I die and I realize, oh, there's nothing. I just fade into nothingness. But if Jesus does exist, then it's a win for me. I certainly don't want to be the guy that feels there's nothing after we die and then decides to die to figure out whether or not that thing exists. That would be terrible.
Yeah, but Meccano, yeah, so okay, so I get your point, right? But you haven't exactly answered the question. Like
No,
what
no,
I
no.
asked
I
Oga
get.
was,
I was just being silly. To your question, I don't think it would matter much, to be honest. I think, and I'm trying to tie it to the question you asked earlier when you talked about maybe religion is just some social construct that we have, like like Karl Marx said, an opium for the masses, and kind of thing that gives some sort of hope, right? And maybe that makes sense to an extent, but I've always wondered, every time I heard that, right? I've always wondered um, how that would explain people that supposedly have everything, but still subscribe to some faith, one faith or another, right? If it's supposed to represent hope for people that are suffering in a very terrible and decaying world, what happens to that 1% that have the world at their feet? Okay, granted, a lot of them don't believe in God, but those that actually identify with one religion or another, how does that explain, what are they holding on to? Because they have everything at their disposal. But to answer your question in terms of what that would mean, really nothing for me. Yeah. If all of this is just a figment of someone's imagination from 2000 years ago, then I would say fair play to the person, because he spent a generation getting a lot of people, conning a lot of people. That would probably be the biggest con ever. If Islam and Christianity are all lies, if none of those faiths exist. if there's nothing after this, then we're probably just essentially what we are: no soul, no spirit. We're living in the moment, and when we're done, everything is done and dusted, and we fade into nothingness. If there is life after death, then it's one of those where whatever your position of faith is in on earth, or currently whatever your position of faith is, while alive, will determine what odds you get when you cross to the other side, I guess.
Okay, I guess the real question shouldn't be what happens after we die, but it should be how our beliefs, our beliefs, our understanding about death shapes how we live our lives now.
Yeah, and I think Emma said
I
that.
think,
I think
yeah,
Emma said something when he
exactly.
said, he tries to be the best version of himself. He tries to be kind and nice to everyone. Tries to always self improve. And I think that's basically the way it should be for everyone that is a Christian. I mean, one other thing that I would add is, I live my life as though today would be my last day. I know a lot of people don't like to hear about death. It's not a subject that a lot of people
Yeah,
like to talk about, but it essentially is that, right? A friend of mine passed last year, and just a few days ago, was his 1 year remembrance. And I spent a I spent a long time today just going through his pictures and thinking about all the memories we've had from back in the days. And this like 1 year without Emeka, and I mean, there's nothing that stops it from being Meikano or Casey or Ima. It could be any one of us. And so, no one is getting out of this life alive. We all die eventually, and I think just being at peace with that, while still
yeah,
holding on to your faith in Jesus, makes all the difference for me.
yeah. So before we round up, right, I will say so my final thought on this is live every day like it's your last, because one of these days it will be.
Will be, yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So Oga, do you have any final thoughts? I think we should wrap the show up now.
Yeah, we should.
Um, no, I will say that we outside of our faith in God, we worry too much about
Yeah,
how we'll be remembered, what we would leave behind, what legacy, what impact we'll leave on this world. And while that is important, I think that as Christians, the most important legacy we want to leave is how we share our experience of Christ with others, and perhaps help someone have an easier journey in their faith than they would have had otherwise. No other legacy is worth struggling for. Not popularity, not fame, not excellence, not wealth. Everything else is pretty much not worth worrying about, because you will be forgotten. You will die. You will be forgotten, and rather
forgotten.
quickly, a lot quicker than you would actually that you realize. And the
True.
world will move
Very
on
true.
just fine. The world will move
Yeah.
on just fine. So live each
Yeah.
day as it will be your last. Do your best, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Mekan, your final thoughts?
I think you guys have said it all. For me, the encouragement is, do the best you can, trust God always, pray always. There's no plan outside God for me. Where Olga said something a few days ago. I think he was saying something about the podcast, and really commending you for a job well done. And he said you've gotten something that is going to see you through the 40s, and you said a very difficult decade, right? And yeah, even as we embrace our 40s and what the 40s bring, lots of uncertainties, that transition from being a young person to middle age and all of that can be very, very, can be quite depressing sometimes. But if there's anything that
Yeah,
has
very
seen me
challenging. You're
through the
frozen
darkest of
again.
days, it's the presence of
Yeah.
Jesus. I really can't believe I'm saying this. But you know, um, yeah, Jesus has um, Jesus has seen me through some very dark days, guys. Some very, very dark days. So, final words for me would be hold on to God. We're living in very dangerous times. The world seems to be on the brink of extinction. The world as we know it might change and very, very soon. You know, lots of tension in country, globally, and we need God to see us through. So my encouragement to everybody out there would be the agnostics, the atheists. God is real. Jesus is real. Salvation is free in Jesus, and He calls us to fellowship with Him by putting our faith in Him and trusting that God has covered, even in a dying and decaying world.
100%. I think on that note, let's end the show right now. Thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until the next episode, take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you, guys.
Bye now.